I'd like to start by talking about the core mechanic here. I think it's pretty hardcore. I mean, overall, the entire content seems to me, the goal of this content is quite hardcore. But as an example, I want to show this screen. When I initially entered the game, I was already being offered the opportunity to start playing. At the same time, I have some counters here, a bunch of different fruits, and yet I'm collecting bananas, but no bananas here. At the same time, there's also some kind of triangular artifact, 3 lives, 2 jumps plus a pause button, and on top of that, an animation. I was a bit confused here. Of course, as a player used to a gradual introduction of content, but I boldly continued. I completed this tutorial level. I realized that it is radically different from what the game's mechanics actually consist of. That is, the levels that are mainly offered to play, and I have some questions about them as well. This picture, I called it Despair and Panic, because the levels generally consist of platforms falling from above, and I need to, by demonstrating some skill, jump across the platforms, waiting for them to fall, and reach the top line. At the same time, here I'm already collecting plums instead of bananas. Here I have some. Am I confused? What's going on? So what should I collect? Why do I need this fruit? I'll be completely honest with you, I have played about 7 or perhaps even 8 sessions in total, all in all. I didn't know how many levels I completed. At the same time, content was locked levels, so I didn't understand when those levels would unlock. So I have a few suggestions regarding the core mechanics. The first suggestion is, wouldn't it make sense to slow down the screen a bit more when performing the second jump? If I saw correctly, there is a slight slowdown, but maybe it would make sense to slow it down a bit more. But that's a matter for discussion. It needs to be tested. Another point is related to level design. Wouldn't it make sense to slow down the platform if I managed to land on it while it's falling? I think it would be interesting to reward me by having the platform stop at that moment. Otherwise, I don't see the point in showing off my skill and jumping onto the platform in advance. All my sessions ended up with me just calmly waiting for the platforms to fall. I didn't collect those fruits at all because honestly, I didn't understand what they were for. I think if the game were level-based, meaning the levels were planned in advance, there would probably be more benefit to it. That's just how it seems to me. But most likely all of this needs to be tested through A/B testing. I don't see the point of these fruits because they're collected more or less the same way. Their animations are the same, except that they're just different visually.
Should fruits give XP or points?
Yeah. So fruits are like money, right? For an apple, you give 3 coins, for a pear 4 coins, and for a banana 5 coins.
Say more, please. I have this problem. I've already talked about it and wrote in the chat, I have a problem with the tutorial's completion rate. So how does it show up? The problem only occurs with cheap users. When I buy users from low-cost countries, like for example, you advised me not to buy from India or Pakistan, but from Latin America and the Philippines. I tried that too. And it turns out, originally I was buying users on TikTok. If I buy on TikTok from Europe, my tutorial completion rate is not perfect, but decent, right? But as soon as I buy users from Brazil or the Philippines, my tutorial completion rate is basically 0. Just so you understand the numbers, out of 200 people, literally only a couple complete it. At first I thought maybe there was some technical issue, like it wasn't launching for them or they just weren't swiping. But I checked and some of them actually managed to play for 10 minutes, swiped over 600 times, and still didn't get past the first level of the tutorial. And honestly, I have no idea what to make of this or how to solve the problem.
If you're buying with a broad target, I think it doesn't really matter on which side you test the tutorial. More or less because you're obviously not aiming for a specific niche, you're targeting a broad player base.
This was just done for the whole country without any restrictions. So it's basically randomized sampling.
Yeah, exactly.
And that means the tutorial is completely unclear.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. You absolutely need your tutorial to be completed by roughly the same percentage of your users, regardless of their country or geographical location. This consistency is crucial. What do you think about the core mechanic itself? Look, I just have an idea. Why isn't there a slingshot mechanic here, where you pull in the opposite direction of the jump so the direction is opposite to the swipe you make? I feel like that's a more classic option.
There actually was a slingshot mechanic at first. I originally tested it just on the friends I could reach. They said it was confusing, uncomfortable, and just very unfamiliar to them. Then I switched it to a direct movement like this, and it became easier for them, so I left it the way it is now. And just a few days ago, while talking with you, I made a special build with the slingshot mechanic for those same poorer countries where you pull back and then release, and the character flies in the opposite direction. And I got exactly the same results as before. I didn't see any difference.
If we're talking about the core mechanic, I actually have a lot of questions about it. It seems to me that just a regular platformer mechanic with upward movement would simply be better. It would give better metrics in any case, because this one has a lot of problems, a lot of player frustrations, as if you just can't make an engaging game out of it at all. First, you set a goal, for example, to reach 50, well, a height of 50. So the player's ultimate goal is something that they absolutely cannot influence at all, is that right? The only thing they can do is wait. So that's frustration at the goal level right away, and then you can get blocked. So you almost reach that level, and like the pieces fall, you get blocked, and you're just standing there in an empty spot, stuck, and the only thing you can do is reset yourself. It's basically a suicide simulator. The first game where you regularly have to kill yourself. Yes.
The animation, the cutting animation there is very good.
About the tutorial, I still feel like there aren't that many options, right? What's going? First, weak countries have weak devices. Maybe it's just that something is lagging for you, right? Second, maybe it's just, well, bots, like bots that click and swipe.
Massive bots originating from the Philippines, Indonesia, and Turkey. Well, no.
The mechanic itself is also hard to control. I mean, on one hand, there's an arrow showing where you jump, but on the other hand, when you land, there's also this glide element, and you can't make precise jumps, so you can't really show off your skill. So in addition to your skill, you also have to roughly estimate how far you'll slide, that slip. It's like you never really know exactly where you'll land. Plus, the second jump itself is also hard to control. The jump consists of two parts, right? First jump, second jump. If you have a bit more time to aim for the first jump and can do it more precisely, then for the second jump you just have to rely on your skill, swipe in the right direction, and hopefully land where you want. But there, you're used to taking more time to aim. That's why I'm saying maybe you need to slow down the camera more during the second jump. There are such examples, perfectly normal in slingshot mechanics, and here I'd like to mention the good old Sling Kong. And they actually have both a level-based mechanic and this endless mode, so I think these should just be two different modes.
I think it would be pretty good, for example, to have a mode like that as one of 10 levels, like something changes, as if to add some variety. I don't know, maybe a boss drops these cubes and you have to get past him. That could work there.
Also, there was a moment when I was given the goal to reach level 50, and by about my 5th or 6th attempt, I actually got the hang of controlling this eye. And I actually jumped onto a platform flying through the air, which hadn't even landed yet. And from that platform, I did a double jump and crossed that line. So for me, that was a totally euphoric moment. I was honestly expecting that now that's it, I've made it, there would be, I don't know, fireworks or something, like, I'm awesome. I thought, damn, this is what I suffered for. But no, the game just kept throwing more platforms at me. I mean, at that moment, they could have just, I don't know, added some particles from all sides to show that you're awesome.
Wait, when these levels keep going up, it's like when you're playing a game, the boss's health bar runs out and then suddenly they restore it and tell you to kill him again. It's same here. If it were an endless mode, that would be one thing, but if it's...
It is endless. This game is endless.
But you have levels. So you finish a level, you get a reward screen, then the next level starts, and there should be another reward screen.
Look, you have the first level, it's a tutorial. It says your goal is 50 meters. When you successfully jump those 50 meters, the current level gracefully ends, and it then takes you directly to the main home screen, where the comprehensive tutorial thoughtfully continues. Then you go in and your first level, which will now count as the second one, is no longer a tutorial, and from there the game is endless. You play until you die, but you have a marker showing your best height, and that will be the highest point you manage to reach.
Look here. So what happens is, just because the tutorial ended at 50 meters, the player gets the expectation that this will be a level-based game. And that's why you expect that once you reach your goal, there will just be a next screen. You expect to go to a screen, collect your rewards, and move on to the next level. That's what's happening. Because the tutorial ended like that, it feels like you just finished the first level, now comes the second, and then there will be a third.
I genuinely think that ending every single level with an inevitable death, in other words, you play until you ultimately lose, is certainly not the most effective strategy in modern game design. So at the end of every level, you're frustrated.
That's how any endless runner works. You die there, that's it. That's just the genre. If we take a really popular one, Subway. There's no other way.
It's deceiving you visually. She doesn't seem like an endless runner.
It doesn't create that feeling. Here, I agree with Evgeny. It really doesn't give the impression of an endless runner game at all.
You can see work in this game. The product has great potential. I'm in the bottom right corner of the screen and can't get out of this pit. So let's remember this image, and I'll go through my points one by one. The first and most important point I want to make is to lower the difficulty, because the game is extremely hardcore. I've played it many times and only managed to reach 140 meters. That's, as I understand it, just the beginning. I haven't even started to understand it. Why do I want to lower the difficulty at the start of the game? Because, well, the most obvious thing is that the game has made its entry threshold way too high. That's the first thing. The second is that there are far fewer hardcore players in the world than, say, midcore players. Those who are willing to play something that won't make their butts burn or their chairs catch fire and so on. I believe that in this case, the game should be a bit more forgiving to the player, at least at the beginning, and give them a moment to actually enjoy the game, because right now, the game immediately starts taking pleasure in killing you. Now, to be more specific, the next point is to make tower construction less random. As you can see, your randomness leads to situations like the one in the picture. The game very often builds these tall towers, and if you fall from them, there's no way to get out. And as the cherry on top, the game will even put a lid over you so you can't even try to escape. Maybe it's worth optimizing the randomness of the falling blocks somehow and preventing situations like this, which, honestly, do nothing but frustrate the players. Next, the game currently creates lava pits. I've noted this as a separate point, simply because I've fallen into them myself. The game often traps me in situations where it's impossible to escape, like covering me with a lid when I'm in a pit. Well, you could also look at this as a game design element. Whether it's good or bad, you can judge for yourself. But for me personally, ending up in these traps often, especially at the beginning, was unpleasant. And again, there's absolutely no way to get out of them. That is, when the game doesn't give you any answers to the questions it poses itself, I feel like that's not quite the right philosophy. On the one hand, the game says, show skill or die, but on the other hand, it seems to be designed for the fact that I will constantly die. It was already mentioned here, I think, by Anton, that this is a game about death. Exactly. And that really does create that kind of feeling. Basically, all the points I'm going to make here are about the same thing, that I died way too often. I mean, it's great that the game rewards you for skill, but at the same time, it feels like the game is kind of mocking you a little, saying, well, it's nice that you're so skilled now, but still go ahead and die. I have a question for you. How does the game reward me for collecting fruits? I didn't feel any benefit from it, except for the purely arcade element of just collecting something. So why am I collecting them?
There's this thing, like I mentioned at the beginning, the idea here was actually deeper, but it's a bit unfinished, yeah. So the fruits, when you run out of all your lives, they just get converted into coins. And with the coins, you can buy those same lightning bolts, meaning energy or health. You can go to the shop and buy them.
That sounds rather kind of confusing, actually. After playing this game for about half an hour, I still didn't figure it out. Well, I mean, I didn't really try to figure it out specifically, like digging through the menus to see what the fruits give me. I feel like I shouldn't do that. The game should explain this to me in clear language. In other words, as I play, I should clearly understand why I'm doing all of this. Now, here's another little technical point. Why do I sometimes, on occasion, get 3 jumps? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just that I didn't understand what gives me the 3rd jump sometimes.
The game actually gives you a bit of a beneficial break, a slight advantage. You don't simply have 2 generic jumps. Instead, you are specifically granted 2 distinct jumps that are exclusively directed upwards, allowing for vertical progression. You can always jump to the side or down.
Well, look, this is good. I don't know if it's good or bad that this is hidden, that it's an implicit mechanic. That's a good thing. Maybe it's something that will be discovered by those players who really get hooked on the game and eventually realize, like, aha, you can jump sideways for free because, well, as a mechanic, that's actually good. So I didn't have any particular irritation about it at all, of course. And all I truly felt was, well, a profound surprise and immense joy that I didn't actually die. And the game even gave me one more jump, and somehow I managed to save myself. At the same time, I made that jump purely on reflex because I had already jumped twice and shouldn't have tried again. In short, I don't really know how to comment on this moment. This 3rd hidden jump, for example. Well, or rather, it's clear that it's not a 3rd hidden jump, but that the side jumps are free. But either way, it's a confusing moment. When will some additional mechanics appear? I've played the game more than 30 times and reached 140 meters. I realize that's not much because I think that was only the 3rd milestone or something like that. The only thing that appeared very quickly were those spiky falling things, which, by the way, it turns out you could actually break by jumping down on them. That was also a pleasant discovery for me. And I think it was pretty well balanced, the fact that there's such a mechanic. And it's not explicitly mentioned, but I get to discover it myself during gameplay. That was cool. But during my playthrough, I started to feel like I was just doing the same thing over and over, and I was wondering, when is something new going to show up?